I'm AJ Bianco, host of Reflect Ed, a part of the Education Podcast Network. Just like the show you're listening to now, shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hey, welcome back. Steve here, and today I'm talking with Jeanne McCarty, and she is the CEO of Outteach. Outteach is helping schools turn outdoor spaces into science learning labs. Oh, this is so cool. This is so awesome. It's time to get the kids excited about learning outside the school building. You're going to love this. Thanks for listening. And oh, by the way, before you go, it'd be so cool if you went to my website, stephenmiletto.com/reviews, and left a review, maybe 5 stars, and how about some nice words? Could you do that for me? That'd be so cool. You are awesome. Enjoy the show.
It's the Education Podcast, your favorite show, with lots of groovy guests and they share what they know. So crank it up to 10 and let your neighbors know that here's another show with Dr. Steve Miletto. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. With Dr. Steve Miletto.
Jeanne McCarty joined Outteach as the first CEO in 2007. Since then, she has spent her days setting strategies, securing resources, and mobilizing as many people as she can towards their vision for all children, no matter their resources, to have access to a transformative, hands-on education. Together with a talented team and visionary board, they have grown Outteach from a local nonprofit to a national organization that inspires and prepares hundreds of thousands of students to be thinkers, dreamers, and doers. A few years back, a national survey noted that kids in grades K through 3 were taught science for an average of just 18 minutes a day, compared with 89 minutes for English language arts and 57 minutes for math. Outteach, a nonprofit, delivers personalized hands-on training, collaborative partnerships, and easily accessible resources that help teachers recast everyday outdoor spaces into exciting labs. Jeanne joins me to talk about science instruction, specifically outdoor science learning, and why it is critical that more children have access to this kind of learning. Education is in her DNA. Jeanne grew up in the piney woods of Mississippi, where her parents and grandparents were educators. Her dad was most at home outdoors, and her earliest memories are days spent in his gardens and exploring creeks near their home. For more than 30 years, she has followed in their footsteps, yet forged her own path to bring real-world experiences to all students from kindergarten to college. Jeanne enjoys at the end of a long day sitting on the back porch with her family, especially in July when the bats and fireflies are out, or spending time on the couch with her family and the cats. Jeanne, thanks for joining me today, and say hi to everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Well, I'm so glad that you're here, and we got a whole bunch to talk about here. This is cool. And by the way, so we're getting close to July. It's bat time and firefly time, so that's neat. That's have you ever studied bats or anything like that, or is it just something that you think is kind of cool?
Oh, it's just something I think is cool. I don't study them, but I do have this little sonar attachment that I can put into my iPhone and listen to bats, nice. And I just love to do it. That's
cool. That's very cool. Fascinating creatures. I've had them invade my home where suddenly one flies in from the outside and is like, nice. I think you're all a little lost here. Let's get you out of here. And I much prefer watch them chase insects and things like that around a nice outside light or something. And if you've never experienced going to some place like Carlsbad Caverns where they come out at night, that's a cool thing.
Yeah, no, I've been in Austin. I've watched them there and just love that so much.
Nice. Very nice. Well, let's talk a little bit about Outteach. I mean, what is it and how long has it been around and what's its purpose?
Yeah, great. Well, I'd love to talk about Outteach. Our organization was built with the future in mind. So we really envision an education system, especially early on, that inspires kids and prepares them to be our next generation workforce. So when we think about the future, we really need young people to be able to problem solve and think critically and be our innovators of the future. And so that's why we built Outteach, and that's what it's about. And so what we do are a couple of things. So one is we transform schoolyards into real world labs where teachers can go outdoors and bring learning to life for students, and especially in science. And in addition to building those, we also coach and train teachers one-on-one. So they get the skills and kind of work closely with us to be able to teach outdoors. So it's very different for teachers. Teachers aren't trained to take class outside. So we want to make sure that they can do that. And, for us, it really is about science and science early on. You mentioned that statistic of 18 minutes of science a day. It's just not enough to really get someone engaged in science. So we do that through the outdoors. And that's what we're about, Stephen.
That's so cool. I appreciate you sharing that. It's science is so important. And one of the things that's really cool about it is, you automatically have built-in permission to get messy. and you just got to take advantage of it, man. And here you're helping them get outside and stop just being in the building. I like that. So tell me, why is science education important for elementary school students? I mean, what's the value of it?
Yeah. So, if you look at today's job market, the STEM job sector is growing faster than any other. So, just recent statistics, it's 2 times faster than all other job sectors combined. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think about the 50 million students we have in our public schools today. How can we create a path for them where they can take on these jobs of the future? So without science, there is really no way to envision yourself as a scientist. And the way that we approach this is that we want kids just outdoors actually engaging and doing science. And if they can do science, they can see themselves as scientists of the future. And then even if for those children that don't take on kind of a STEM job or even, want to consider that as an occupation, the problem solving skills and the critical thinking that come from science, the ability to collect evidence and data, build arguments, all of these tools and skills are needed for any career path a child may choose.
What's really cool is that, just the process of introducing or getting a chance to experience or understand what you're talking about so that it's not just a word is a cool thing, because that's what you're doing there, is giving that chance to experience. And I love it. Nice. OutTeach transforms outdoor spaces into real-world labs that bring science to life at its partner schools. Can you walk us through what this process looks like? I mean, how's this work?
Oh, I'd love to, Stephen. So this is one of my favorite parts of our program. So when we are partnering with a school to build what we call an outdoor learning lab, we start with a design competition for students. And so every student in the school has an opportunity to kind of think about what do they want to see in their outdoor learning lab, in their outdoor space. And they come up with some of the most creative ideas. Some we can execute, some we can't, and I'll share a little more about those. But we also work with teachers because these labs are really for teachers. And so we want to make sure we get their input too, understand what they're teaching, what they're struggling with, and what kind of outdoor features might help them do their jobs better. And, so that's what we do. We work with students, we work with teachers. Then we put together a design plan that we share with the school and the principal for feedback, come up with a final design, and then we show up. And so oftentimes it's with a corporate partner. We have amazing corporate partners that are really invested in building their future workforce. They'll bring out volunteers, upwards to like 150 people show up in the morning. They see what looks like a blank canvas. So when they arrive, we've done a lot of pre-work, but it's like a blank canvas. And then we put them to work building arbors, vegetable beds, earth science stations, weather stations, all kind of things that then become an outdoor learning lab. Students come in throughout the day. So students come, like I was at a school in Texas last week, and 800 students, every single one of them painted their own rock to put out into the outdoor learning lab. So we want them involved as well, because this really is their space. And I mentioned the design competition. So in this at this build in Texas, for the first time, we built an outdoor life-size chessboard on the sidewalk. And this idea came from a student. We'd never done it before, and we just thought, let's do it. I mean, this is a great idea. Let's see what happens. And so we taped it off. We worked with volunteers to paint it, and we found these large size chess pieces. And so this school now in Texas has an outdoor learning lab with a full human-sized chessboard. So I can't wait to hear more about that.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. This is so cool. It's funny because, a lot of times what happens is that even though adults mean well, it becomes, inside the building is all about the learning, the academic or the class itself. And outside is for, run, be free, fly, whatever. We're actually, they're missing out on what's really cool is the stuff that really engages kids that's out there and then outside. And I mean, let's talk a little bit about how science learning is different when it's done outdoors. I mean, and can you just touch on a little bit about, are kids losing out by leaving the classroom to have that science class outside? I mean, can you talk about that stuff?
Sure. So, if you think about it, life science, earth science, physical science, it all happens outdoors. And so why are we not out there learning about it in real time and really, in that way that inspires awe and interest in students? So what we work with teachers to do, you got to make teachers comfortable. So you can't just build it and expect them to come out. Like, we really want them to be comfortable teaching outdoors and teaching science specifically, but also bringing in English language arts, bringing in math, and integrating all those things together. So I can give you a couple of examples, I think, that might bring it to life. I was talking to a teacher who had gotten Teacher of the Year at his school in Texas, Mr. Harris, and he shared with me that his favorite lesson outside is teaching about weathering and erosion. And so if you think about it, like weathering and erosion, so, the way that teachers may bring that to life in the classroom is looking at pictures of the Grand Canyon or looking at videos of the Grand Canyon, but that's really not kind of relatable for students. So, not many students actually will even go and see the Grand Canyon. And it's just such a different example of erosion and weathering. So instead of that, we, Mr. Harris and OutTeach with the teachers that we're working with, we show them how to go outdoors, investigate and find examples of erosion on a schoolyard, and then talk about it, watch it over time, see things happening in real time. And if you think about the careers of the future, those examples of erosion are what our builders, our architects, are really going to need to understand. And also when children see that in kind of a real world setting that they can relate to, they start seeing it in their own yards. They start seeing it as they're walking around, and it just solidifies that knowledge. So, that's an example. Another example that's really simple is, I know we can all relate to this, but think about when you in second grade likely learned about the parts of a plant. So you got a worksheet, you had some kind of nondescript plant, and you labeled the parts of the plant, and then then you get tested on it. So it's so much easier to go outdoors and have young people actually pull up something, pull a weed, pull something up, and really experience like why those roots are there holding that plant in place, what that structure of the plant is about, and how it functions in a larger setting. So it's those things that are relatable, that create an experience that a kid can draw back on. And then when it comes time to see if they really deeply understand it, they draw on those experiences. So those are a couple of examples. I mean, I have so many because it's just, like I said, it's all happening outdoors. So I could talk about this for days.
That's awesome. I love it. There's, what's really cool too is it kind of changes a kid's mindset a little bit. When they're going outside and they're going out there, but they're not. They're expected to kind of learn something about and pay attention to what's going on outside, not just, bebopping all around or something like this. And it's such a cool thing because it's, you walk by it all the time and you may not have really paid attention to one of my favorite things is to pay attention to the little critters like ants and stuff like this, because as they're moving from one place to another, or they're moving whatever they're moving, or they've grabbed some giant dead grasshopper and they're trying to push that thing into their, into their living area.
Yeah. And Stephen, I'll also add to just the questions it stirs up for students, so why does this plant grow more than this one? Why is there a crack in this rock? And so it's that curiosity that you just have to go with. And that's how kids will relate to it. That's how they'll learn. That's how they'll get excited about education, and then build upon that as they think about their, what's possible for them in the future.
Oh, you're so right. It's so awesome. By the way, you're making me want to go outside right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and our teachers too. So, teachers tell me also, like, it just gives them that opportunity to be curious alongside their students. So this isn't just good for students. This is also good for our teachers. And I think we are recognizing more and more that we need to find those opportunities that bring kind of joy back into the teaching profession. So this is one of them.
That's so cool. So since you brought them up, how does OutTeach prepare teachers to lead science learning outdoors? Because you got to do something about it. Because it's you got to remind them about certain things. How do you get them ready to go do that?
Yeah, sure. And you even mentioned, if you go outside, like, it's not about running loose. And so, I think that sometimes teachers may think that's what their students will do, and so we work very closely with teachers. We have a coaching model. So we believe that on-the-job learning for teachers is just as critical as on-the-job learning for any of us. And so we're there with them side by side doing several things. So one is modeling lessons. So with their students during the school day, providing an example and showing them how you can teach using the outdoors. And in while we're doing that, we're also modeling classroom management techniques, different things that we have honed over the years. And so we're with those teachers, a group of teachers at a school over the course of a year, doing this coaching. So we're planning with them. We're not giving them lesson plans. We're really saying, what do you need to teach? And then how can we either extend this or teach this better in an outdoor setting? And then helping them plan so they can do this on their own after they're finished with OutTeach program. We also do some larger format training. So, sometimes we'll pull an entire, grade level together across a school district or partner with the district to work with their coaches. But, we train and coach in the way that we want teachers to educate students. So in a very hands-on, experience-based way. And that is the way to really make sure that these outdoor spaces or any outdoor space is utilized for teaching.
Yeah, it's so cool because one of the things that it's unfortunate because a lot of times great areas will go unused because they're not thought of in that manner. And it's, sometimes you get some outdoor amphitheaters or something like this that might get structured out of some grant or something like this, but there usually is just these different areas that are just perfect to look at. You talk about erosion. I mean, where the water's coming down a side of a hill or something like this, and they, maybe they didn't quite do the pushing of the dirt around so that the water flows the right way. So now they've got these huge areas that are, the dirt's being pulled away and the plants are tumbling down the hill or something like this.
Uh-huh.
There's such cool stuff out there that they could learn from. So.
Yeah. And just think about the example you just gave. It's an opportunity to then problem solve with students. So why is this happening? What can we do to change it? Have them test, have them, monitor and try to create solutions. And so then what are they doing? They're being scientists. So, it's much when they get to actually do science and not sit in the classroom and learn, vocabulary. It just brings it to life and is so much more fun. So we haven't talked about that too. It's just so much more fun.
Oh, definitely. So much more fun. So yeah, this is cool. So you got all this good stuff going on, and I got to say this seems like an appropriate time to bring this in. One of the things that's really emphasized a lot in our world today is tech of some sort. The idea, not that this is an anti-tech message that I'm about to say, but I mean, have you thought about, when it comes to, looking at what's going on in the science classroom and stuff like this, that there might be an overemphasis on some of the tech and robotics and things like this. Does it kind of take children's, imagination or things like this away, or does it have some impact on them? Can you talk about like that some?
Yeah. So there's several different things I'd like to respond to there. I mean, one is that there's this professor out of Indiana University, Adam Maltese, and I am obsessed with his research because what he looks at is National Science Foundation scientists that are funded. How did they come to science? And he makes the case that we have to have just a broad array of things that occur for people to be interested in science. So when you get so focused on one way to do science like robotics, you are missing out on so many other kids that might come and be interested, and come to science. Like I think about myself, like I always loved, the outdoors and just spent so much time, like you said in the beginning, like just exploring creeks and watching ant beds also and spiders. And, I can even put myself back in those moments, but that was disconnected from what I was doing in the classroom. I was learning about clouds by creating little cotton structures, and it would be so easy to just take that one more step and connect this to science. So, when you get narrow on your focus, you aren't bringing in the just, diversity of people that could be interested in science.
That's so important to recognize, because there's just so many things that, especially as it can show, someone might really be their thing, just to be, messing around and poking and looking at the little creatures that have created the little spirals in the side of a pine tree and the bark and stuff like this. And they have these little colonies as you pull it away, or and are they actually damaging the tree? Or are they, good for it, or what? The same thing with all kinds of stuff, like the little aphids and stuff like that live on the other side of leaves. And it's just such to me, it helps expand. One of the things that's going on right now, is you can't help but notice this gentleman who's doing a lot of attempting to try and build his own rocket, and he's built his rocket and launching it into space and having it turn around and try and land and all kinds of stuff like that. And there's just cool stuff that comes out of your imagination. You never know what it might spark with somebody who's watching something like that, or getting a chance to mess with the bugs in the bark, or whatever it is, that suddenly they start thinking, hey, I got some ideas about this, and becomes their thing.
Yeah. And like I always think with young kids, you have to bring science down to earth. I mean, you have to bring it to where they see it and they touch it and they feel it. I can still think about, when my son's 14 now, but when he was probably, first or second grade, we were at the National Zoo here in DC, and it was at a time when the tent caterpillars were crawling.
Nice. And
so we were by the elephants and all of these other things. And he just wanted to sit and watch the tent caterpillars. And nice. I let him, right. I still have a picture of him that day, but I thought, you have to go with what fascinates kids. And at that age, it's the things they can touch and, use all of their senses to engage with.
That's so important. That's so cool too. I could see that happening too. Being at the zoo, and it's a cool zoo, by the way, if you've not been there, and, but paying attention to the other little critters that are there. Nice.
Yeah, I called it tent caterpillars trump big game. I mean, it was nice. It was wonderful.
Tiger's like, pay attention to me, man, not those things. What are you doing? I like that. So let's talk. This kind of lends itself to this next part where I'm going, which is, how does Outteach make a concerted effort to have its programs reach girls and those in underserved communities?
Yeah, so going back to the research of Dr. Maltese, when you look at how he kind of charts out an interest in science, the top two categories that bring girls to science are an interaction with nature and some experience outdoors, and a teacher. And so by design, we are creating opportunities for girls to become more interested in science. And then we do other things. So there are partnerships we have. We've worked with a group called the If Then Collection, and it features women scientists telling their stories. They're mostly, they're all women, a lot of women of color scientists. And so we think it's important to partner with them and bring that work into ours. So students can see scientists that look like them. And in an outdoor classroom just recently, we actually experimented. This is the first time too. We're doing a lot of firsts this month, but we also put an outdoor mirror in place that says, this is what a scientist looks like. And I just got pictures of the girls going through that part of the outdoor classroom. So, it's about what may interest and bring them in, what is relatable, and then kind of what they can envision for themselves in the future.
That's really cool, because that's one of the things that, if you were a child whose parents took time to spend time or you had a family structure that lent itself to the ability to do this stuff. If they don't have those experiences, being able to create it for them, because just what it generates are just, like you said, just cool thoughts about looking in the mirror and, hey, I could be a scientist. That's right, I could. And who knows what they might generate someday at one of those, from a science fair to wherever it goes from there type of thing that might solve some of the problems we have, which I love that. So good stuff. I mean, so how does schools find you? I mean, how do you find them? I mean, how do you what's it look like as you start trying to set up a program? I mean, does someone call you up and say, I was a history teacher. I studied to be middle school science and just focused on high school history instead. But they just call you up, the teacher call you up and say, hey, I'd like to do this. How does that work?
Yeah, so it's a lot of different ways. I mean, we have some partnerships with school districts across the country. And so a lot of times we're working with district leaders to make sure that we can implement across a school district. And then we also have schools and teachers that reach out to us, and we find ways to make it possible to work together. So, in this last year, we've had communities of teachers come together across the country that we're working with, and also just large kind of district-wide partnerships with school districts that really want to change what science education looks like for them.
Very cool. So let's talk about, can you give us an example of what a real-world outdoor learning can happen in an inner city setting, and possibly look at a rural remote location as well? Can you talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, I can. I mean, I think that, it can look very similar. We all share the same sky. We all have kind of the things that are growing around us. And so, it's really possible in any location and any patch of grass or sidewalk even, that you can use the outdoors to teach. So during COVID, even when students were at home, we worked with teachers to have students do things even from their windows if it wasn't safe for them to go outdoors or their parents, weren't home. But you can find an opportunity anywhere to learn at any time of the year too, because I often get asked about, the winter, but science is happening then as well. So there's just opportunities everywhere. The examples I gave you earlier, erosion, parts of a plant, all of that, you can teach in an outdoor setting.
That's so cool. It's, there's all kinds of different aspects to it. I was watching something the other day where on the show they were talking about having to recreate oyster beds and things like this that have been killed off by oil that had been generated over the years in this area. And it was real cool because they had kids who got to spend time helping to figure out how to put those oysters, start them back, thriving and living again. And it's just neat, the different types of focus that you can have in something like this. I mean,
yeah. So that's an incredible opportunity. I mean, I think that's a great opportunity of a hands-on kind of work together, and when I think about just what we all share. So, even studying things like the Earth's rotation, you need something very simple where you can watch kind of a shadow over time, and that can be done anywhere. It's not, I think there's often this thought that you need acres and acres of wilderness, but you don't.
You get that right. Not at all. Just create the spark within the teacher, create the spark within the child, and watch the magic happen. So I think it's cool what you can generate from what you're talking about. So good stuff. Jeanne, if someone, we're about to finish up, and if someone wanted to follow up and connect with you and learn more, where would you send them?
Yeah, so I'd send them to our website, and I'd say, go and sign up through there so we can keep in touch with them and share kind of opportunities that are happening in their community. Also find us on social media and interact with us on social media. So we're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as Outteach Ed and Outteach Education. And we're always looking for stories of teachers that are, doing this kind of work, whether they're with Outteach or not. So we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear what's working in your schools as well.
Very cool. And I'll have that information in my show notes, so it's easy for them to find and reach out to you. So good stuff. I got two last questions that I'd like to ask you, and I like to ask my guests these questions. And the first one is, how do you keep going when so much is going on that you may want to quit?
It's a great question because so much is going on. But I think for me, it's really two things. So one, it's when I see the impact in action. So really getting out in schools and seeing kind of the difference that we're making, not just with students, but also with teachers, particularly at this time. So it's a teacher that can say, I've been teaching for 30 years, and this is the most inspiring training that I've ever had. That keeps me going because that's what we're here about. And then, it's also, I'm always really challenged by, thinking about how to grow and do more, because I think every school should have these opportunities. So, that's a challenge ahead, and that kind of keeps me interested and engaged.
That is so cool. Great thoughts there. Last question. Do you have a teacher in your past who made a difference in your life? If so, who was it? And what would you say if given the chance to say thank you?
So I have so many teachers. So many teachers I think about. So from Miss Lois Rogers in my high school English teacher to Marjorie Sproul, who was one of my professors at college. But I think that the teacher who impacted me most is my dad. So my dad was a professor of history at the University of Southern Mississippi. He grew up in Mississippi. He went away and got his PhD and came back and just felt a real drive to educate. He always says, I'm about educating the students here in Mississippi. And what he really taught me was just to love learning. I mean, I think that for him, education was more than just, a path to economic self-determination, but it was also a way to have a good life. He said there's always something to learn. And so, I just caught that spark from him. And so it's what has driven me throughout my career. It's what drives me in my life. And so I think that, I'd have to thank my dad.
That is so awesome. Thank you so much. Jeanne, thanks so much for talking with me. OutTeach has such an awesome focus, learning science in the outdoors. Okay, that's so cool. I just love it. I mean, getting messy and learning and watching and becoming part of, maybe solving some problem that the adults hadn't figured out how to do yet. That kid's going to be the one to does it, thanks to you. Wishing you success in everything you do.
Thank you so much, Stephen, and thanks, everybody.
Hey, you have been listening to Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12, a podcast to help you help kids achieve their dreams. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is a member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is a member of the podcast network based in Canada called Voice Ed Radio. Voice Ed Radio, your voice is right here. The opinions expressed on Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 are those of the guests and host. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is intended to share ideas, advice, and suggestions. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is produced for educational purposes. Hey, thanks for listening. It would be awesome if you visited my website at stephenmiletto.com and connected with me, left a review, and listened to more episodes. And by the way, you could also share it with your friends, with your family, and your colleagues. Thanks so much. You're awesome.